Hello, good morning, good evening.
It's evening here. Good morning to you there.
Yes.
And to everyone else who is listening, welcome to another episode of the Filipino Freethinkers podcast that's also a video. This is another in the series of conversations for a cause, something we do to raise awareness and encourage people to help in the relief and rehabilitation efforts that's ongoing right now. So with us today is Edwina Rogers, and she is the Executive Director of the Secular Coalition for America. Hi, Edwina. How are you today?
I'm doing great, thank you.
So our conversation today is actually very relevant to what we're doing here in the Philippines. As you probably know, ours is a very predominantly Catholic country, and I agree with many of the things that I've read about the way you do things. Because to get anything done, you have to sometimes make compromises and you have to see things from the other side. And we're going to hear about that from you in a bit. So you've been the executive director of the Secular Coalition for America, or the SEA, for almost 2 years now. Is that correct?
Yes, in April, well, the end of March, it'll be 2 years.
Okay, but I read that your appointment to the position was quite controversial in the secular community to begin with. And for the benefit of us in the free thought community here in the Philippines who hasn't heard about what happened, can you tell us a bit of the story about why your appointment was so surprising to many and with some even strongly opposing it?
Yes, that was correct because at the moment, at this time, people who are non-theists vote about close to 75% Democratic, and they vote 25% Republican. But in the early 80s, that was much more evenly split. But as the Christian right moved into the Republican Party, then a lot of non-theists moved over to the Democratic Party. So the fact that I am a professional Republican, I've been very involved in the Republican Party, they were a little concerned about perhaps maybe a fox in the henhouse.
Yeah. So for the benefit of the free thinkers here in the Philippines, in our context, that's kind of like someone who worked very closely with Senator Tito Soto. That's our equivalent of someone like Rick Santorum.
Yeah.
And suddenly becoming the head of a group like the Filipino Free Thinkers. So unfortunately, we don't have a group of the same caliber of the Secular Coalition for America yet. So I'll have to use the Filipino Free Thinkers. But that would already be very surprising for a lot of people. Like someone who worked with Tito Soto, suddenly it's like they go to the other side and lead that movement, sort of. So you consider yourself a conservative Republican, correct?
Yeah.
When we imagine conservative Republican, we usually think of someone who is anti-choice, anti-women, anti-LGBT, anti-science, anti-secularism, and anti-welfare. So can you share with us how you differ from this typical stereotype of a conservative Republican?
Well, all of my positions in the past when I was working with, like, for example, the Bush administration at the White House have been economic based. So I'm fiscally conservative, but on the human rights issues, I guess I would be considered progressive. And I'm certainly not the only one, because if you think that maybe about 50% of the Americans are more Republican leaning and 50% are Democratic, you're looking at, we have a population of more than 350 million. So you're looking at, something close to 175 million people that would think of themselves as Republican. So obviously not all of them would be the things that you just listed. And as a matter of fact, on all those issues, I'm just the opposite and have been my whole life.
Yes, it reminds me of the situation here where the Catholic Bishop Conference wants to label Catholics a certain way, while a lot of Catholics do not actually follow the party line. So, but more on that later. First, you have worked with many Republicans who were very conservative, who actively promoted and probably still actively promotes many things that you fundamentally disagree with. So have you ever worked on something that you fundamentally disagree with? And if you have, like, how do you deal in situations like that?
Well, it actually has only happened to me once in my life, and it actually had nothing to do with Republican politics. So, as an attorney and as a professional, like for example, if you have a position with the U.S. government or the Filipino government, and it's not that you agree with everything that that government does, or you could be working for a university and maybe you don't agree with every position that that university takes. So we can't all be self-employed. So when I worked for the U.S. government at the White House, I mainly worked on adding prescription drugs to our Medicare program, which I think just about everybody in the world would agree was a very good thing to do. And I worked on other economic issues. So just one time I was working for a group of Fortune 500 companies, and they were generally opposed to adding mental health benefits, required mental health benefits to their health care plans, and I testified in Congress against that, although personally I thought it was a really good idea.
I see, I see. And what was it like working with people whose values differ so much from yours? Like I read that you have been supporting the Planned Parenthood Foundation for 25 years or so.
Yeah.
But some of the people that you have worked with are the same ones who are trying to defund Planned Parenthood. How did that feel for you? How did that work?
Well, I just think that as someone who is a staff person for a president or for a senator, you're usually given a certain portfolio. And many times the issues that you're working on, like, for example, at one point I spent a lot of time working on international trade issues. Well, I never really ran into any conflict there. But I never really worked on abortion or contraception or anything along those lines. The only thing I remember ever coming close was when I was working in the Senate, we were working on a global AIDS bill, and my personal position was to arm people with all the information, all the latest drugs and technology, where some of the more conservative senators were focused on abstinence only with regard to sex education. But then I just carved out an area that would be something that everyone would agree on, like, for example, making sure people had clean syringes that could not be reused.
I see, I see. So you look for something that you could agree on, and you worked on that.
Yeah.
We have a similar situation in the Philippines now. Of course, you've heard of Typhoon Haiyan and how it hit the Philippines, and how everyone is coming together and forgetting their differences for now, so that work can be done. But groups like ours, we still prefer to tell people to donate their money and their to volunteer for secular causes whenever possible, because some are concerned that when you help these religious causes, although the benefit is directly for a secular thing, you kind of help them to proselytize or to promote themselves in a way. So you indirectly increase their power to promote things that you disagree with. So in the end, there's kind of a net loss in your, no matter, depending on how you see it. So isn't it the same with what you have done, or in the Republican Party? Like you help them succeed in causes that you agree with, but at the same time you bolster their effectiveness and their reputation so that they're more effective in those things that you do disagree with.
Yeah. Well, I personally, of course, don't do that. I was walking by someone who was collecting money for Salvation Army just a few days ago, and I informed them that the Salvation Army does discriminate with that money, certainly in the hiring. And so in the secular movement, we do a national and international update phone call every Thursday, and we focus on charity. So we've been talking about requesting secular people, non-theists, to give to Foundation Beyond Belief, and also give to non-believers giving aid, which is part of the Richard Dawkins Foundation. And then those groups are making sure that money go to secular charities like Doctors Without Borders and groups that are not affiliated with any religion. We spend a lot of time fighting these religious carve-outs and exemptions so that they can take federal government money and donations and use them to discriminate. They use them when discrimination on their hiring, on the healthcare contraception issue, and the list goes on. A lot of discrimination against the LGBTQI community here in the U.S. from the religious groups. So it's something that I'm very aware of. Now, when I worked on economic issues in the White House, I wasn't even really familiar that there was a faith-based office there, but it's something that even President Obama has only strengthened and continued to fund. Religion in politics is a big problem with both parties, both of the major national parties, and we have 535 elected officials, of which really only one currently admits to not being affiliated with religion. Well, that's not statistically possible with 22% of the population not being affiliated with religion. So they're just not being truthful, as you know.
So you know several people who are working in government who are just in the closet as non-theists or atheists even.
Oh, yes, of course I do. We've gone around and surveyed them, and we said that we would keep it confidential, but we know of at least 35. They'll list themselves as Unitarian Universalists or Episcopalian, something that's a little bit more mild of form of religion and Christianity that could be used to inoculate people against some of the other more extreme forms of religion. So, but I think it's a matter of time, and we're going to be able to get them to come out and feel comfortable once it's just more acceptable. So we're really trying to catch up with the success of the LGBT community here in the U.S. and just getting people, the person next door, the waitress, the taxi cab driver, the movie star, the sports star. It's cool, it's okay, it's normal to be atheist, freethinker, agnostic.
I see. So you became the executive director of the SCA. Was it something that you imagined or you desired to do? Because when you were working the Republican, as a Republican, you already had a secular outlook back then, right? You were already secular minded. So did you ever at some point think, hey, I want to work more on that area, or was it something that kind of circumstances led you to accept the position, or how involved were you in becoming the where you are right now?
Well, that's a very good question. So I was at the time I was running a big national coalition in the healthcare arena, and I had always been interested in human rights issue, but had never really had a position or a lot of training on human rights issues. And so I just got to a point in my life where I thought that would be great. I was actually contacted by a national search firm. They contacted me and said that they thought that my background would be ideal for this position, and was I comfortable with everything that they were working on. And of course I was. I was actually based in a very rural conservative area where everyone at the moment is predominantly Republican, but I was what I would consider unchurched. Like, my parents never took us to a church. And then I did get the opportunity to travel and spend a lot of time around the world, take comparative religion. So I have seen the harms of religious indoctrination around the world. And so I leaped at the opportunity. I thought it would be great and that I could make a difference. It's really the up-and-coming issue and the in crowd, and growing by leaps and bounds every year.
Yeah, so I'm only imagining, like, you had a group of the most skeptical people, and you had to convince them to give you the job. Like, how do that? Like, you came in and the odds were against you, so to speak, and yet you're here now. So how did you pull that off?
Yes. Well, I did hear later on, quite a few of them said, the leaders of all the national organizations are on my board, and they said they came to interview me because they, in particular, wanted to destroy me and make sure I didn't get the job. But then in the 3 or 4 hour process that actually went on for many weeks, many 3 and 4 hour meetings, I felt like I was getting married. They got to know me, they got to know my values and what I was capable of doing, and that I was very honest and genuine and do care about these issues. As a matter of fact, I've even written on these issues in the past. And so I do certainly have the track record. If you research me, you could never find me anywhere ever promoting discrimination or thinking that it's right, or promoting religion, or wanting religious views to be involved in the government. It was just never my portfolio or my platform. So I'm very happy that it is now. You know, I go to all the conservative and Republican meetings, and they're like, oh, you know, here comes Edwina. She looks after all the godless. And everybody's becoming very curious. The people who are not familiar with humanists or the free thought community, they've all been briefed. They've all heard the story. And, you know, I think it certainly helps the cause to have somebody in every room, and they see that we're good people, that we're ethical, that we're moral. We're getting our ethics, you know, from other areas. We're not getting Bronze Age document or some imaginary spikes camera up in the sky, or anything along those lines. But then also, you know, I am very respectful of other people's views, and I have spent a lot of time in India and Turkey and Korea and Taiwan. I even lived in Korea. So I've had tremendous exposure to different cultures and different religions, and I've seen the harm, but I'm very respectful.
So it's clear to me that you're very sincere about your secular outlook and you project it well, but you came into the scene and there were very harsh critics criticizing you from leaders of the secular, like different secular groups. How did that feel? Like these harsh critics, like really not only being skeptical of you, like you haven't even been given the chance to prove yourself yet, but they've been kind of prejudging you already. So how did you handle that?
Well, I would say that before I actually took the position and when it was offered to me, all of the elected or national leaders in the country were serving on my board, and they were all generally had voted that I should be offered the position, you know, based on my credentials and the fact that they thought I would do a really good job. So they were all supportive, but the criticism was mainly coming from a few bloggers that were not in the room and they were not involved in the process. But everyone who was a decision maker actually felt good about it. They saw it as a wonderful opportunity. They were going to turn it around, and we should not be a partisan group. We actually feel like we're taken for granted by the Democratic Party and the Republicans. Like they didn't even know who we were, that we even existed. So we've turned it into something really positive. And then, of course, there's nothing like delivering success, is there, Red?
Yeah, there's nothing like it. Speaking of success, you mentioned several goals, like in one of those interviews with a blogger, Hemant Mehta of the Friendly Atheist blog. You mentioned several goals at the start of your term, and you said that you were confident that you were the person to get the job, and you were going to do that get it done fast, in your own words. So which of those goals would you say that you've already fulfilled, and which have you yet to accomplish?
Well, I would say that the biggest goal was a lot of the egregious problems are actually happening at the state level. And when I came in, we only had a chapter in Alabama, an affiliate in Arizona. So as you know, we had 48 states where there was no activity. So within the first 6 months, I was able to set up chapters in the other 48 states, also in DC, wow, in Puerto Rico. They all have websites, they have leadership, they have calls, they have activities, they're blocking legislation, supporting legislation, having lobby days, doing op-eds. So that would be the biggest success. And the Secular Coalition for America was thinking it would take something like 10 to 20 years to get those chapters in place. And I said, you know, don't worry about it. I'll have it done in 6 months. So they're all done. There are different degrees of maturity, but they're all up and operating. Also, my other big focus, because I'm actually a coalition expert, has been to unify the movement and facilitate coordination within the movement, not to be in charge of it, but to pull everybody together. We're also helping our friends in Australia and New Zealand, in Canada, offering them back office support. Last month, we worked hard to set up 3 ex-Muslim groups here in the United States, doing their back office support, but not wanting to own or control these groups, but just helping them with anything that they need. So we're good at that. We can even help.
That is impressive. And maybe after this conversation, I can ask you for pointers, because those are things that I want to get done here as well. So
yes.
Congratulations,
for other countries. Help them with their website, help them with research, help them get their charity status, whatever they need.
That's great. aside from that, aside from the SCA in particular, what would you say are the most significant milestones that the secular movement has reached in America since you became executive director?
Well, outside of SCA, I would say another important milestone has to do with the American Humanist Association got a new political action committee, and they're raising money and they're giving donations to candidates who are free thought. So that's something that's very important on the political side. I've seen our community become much more interested in the sense of community, social charity, and also getting involved politically. And also, I've seen the community become much more interested in charity and giving.
Okay, so you mentioned also early on that you think that you had a unique advantage with your Republican background, that you could easier talk to Republicans and to conservative people. But there were critics who said that once they find out that you're working on the secular and progressive goals, that they wouldn't give you the time of day anymore. But what has been your actual experience, like having to talk to people who disagree with you on a fundamental level?
Well, I can tell you that the chairman of the Republican National Committee, after the loss of the elections with Mitt Romney, had the staff contact us at the Secular Coalition for America and asked for a briefing. And so we went over there and gave them a briefing for their new growth and opportunity project because they want to figure out how they can diversify and make themselves a viable choice for the secular community. So I think, having us there and having me there has been very positive for conservative groups, for women's groups. We have a big campaign. We're really short on women. We're short on minorities, very short on Asians, Hispanics, African Americans. So we're reaching out to all those communities, not just the conservatives. But we're short on conservatives, too. We do pretty well with libertarians, not so much with Republicans, but they certainly, we're here to stay. And we're tabling, we're speaking at conferences, we're just out there.
So you're trying to convince people to come out of the closet, so to speak, from all sorts of backgrounds. And speaking of coming out, you yourself, in a sense, have just come out to your professional circles because you were known for being a Republican attorney or lobbyist before, and a lot of those people didn't know about how secular you actually were in terms of your philosophy and outlook. So what was it like the second time coming out? Because I suppose that a lot of your close acquaintances and friends already knew, like way back, that you were already a non-theist.
Yes. Well, I think that just it really didn't come up in conversations for many people. I was seen as a tax expert, a health policy expert, an energy expert, working with a lot of foreign governments. So and also an election campaign finance expert. And my views and opinion on religion and religion's role in government never really came up. So the fact that I was a non-theist, I think people who know me, they were not surprised. And there are many more, I know for sure. But in the U.S. right now, whether you're Republican or Democrat or another party, if you're not affiliated with religion, it's near impossible to get elected. So you have to tick that box and say that you are, you basically have to say that you are a Christian and that you're involved in a church, preferably a large church, a mega church that has a lot of voters as another coalition or another source. But I really haven't experienced any discrimination. And I was never really in the closet if anybody ever asked. I didn't go around I didn't wear it on my sleeve because I was mainly focused on economic issues. And on social issues, I was interested in learning disabilities for children. I was very interested in helping shelters for battered women and children. So I had my favorite social issues and my favorite charities. And, so now that's been, those were my number one and number two focus as far as social or humanitarian issues were those two. Now the list is just a lot longer.
Yeah, so speaking of the LGBT community and coming out, on December 10, they're celebrating their Pride March, which we as an organization are attending. And during these events, we usually encounter fundamentalists, like evangelicals, usually Americans. Interesting, they come all the way here, or they're the Americans, evangelicals who live here, and they go there to protest. They have their megaphones, and they try to disrupt the rally. And we try to approach them. We try to talk to them. It's very difficult. It's very challenging. So, any pointers for us who are attending the Pride March next weekend on how to deal with these people who are extremely conservative?
Yes. Well, we had the same problem here, and we had our Pride March here in D.C. in June, and we tabled and we were there. I would say, my big concern and mystery is I don't understand why people who are in the LGBT movement are religious, or why so many of them are involved in organized religion, other than I know it's their culture, because they certainly have not been treated well by religion, just as women have certainly not been treated well by religion. But I think it's mainly, has to do with education. So the more international, the more worldly, the access to education, if they're in the sciences, is far less likely that you're going to see that. I don't think that they're bad people. I think they simply are completely unaware that, being gay is part of nature and is something that should be accepted, and there are really no harms to them or to society, and it's actually just isn't any of their business.
So it's interesting you mentioned like members of the LGBT community who remain members of these organized religions, and of course a lot of people like I guess you and me would advise them to disassociate with those groups that are doing nothing for them. So I think you understand when people like say that the Republican Party as a whole has a problem, and Republicans, like that label itself, is something to disassociate with. And let's say Catholicism and the Vatican, who are mostly anti-women and mostly anti-LGBT, we characterize these groups not by the diversity of beliefs of the members, but the direction and the leadership, or the things that the leadership says. So is it unfair to characterize groups or movements by the leadership and not by the diversity of the members? Because for me, they definitely have the most impact. Let's say the Vatican goes to like the UN events and they represent their conservative position, and it's not like the members who have diverse opinions can suddenly vote and say, I overrule what our leader said. So what do you think of all this?
Well, I think that it's okay to stay in and try to fix it from the inside. Like, for example, I don't know if you've heard, but the Catholics for Choice and other Catholics here in the United States are trying to get the Vatican to lose their special status at the UN. They're the ones that are the biggest opponents to them having the special status at UN. I think that's hilarious. And so the change in the Republican Party is actually going to happen within. And the change for the LGBT community with the way they're treated by different groups has to happen with the people who are in those groups. So the people who stay in because they see some value of being affiliated with organized religion. Most of the research shows a third of Catholics we know in Canada don't actually believe in God, but they like the community. They don't believe in the scripture, but they like the rituals and singing the songs and seeing their friends. So if they stay in, they certainly just need to chip away at the misinformation and the leaders. And we have to update. It could be like, okay, well, we used to live in caves and we had no fire, so we should all go back to when we lived in caves and we had no fire. Well, of course not. We update ourselves every decade. You can measure our success by the decade now. And so let's see how quickly we can have our forward march of humanity.
Yes. It's interesting you mentioned the Catholics for Choice. We work with the Catholics for Choice here. They're the more active group here that is also affiliated with Catholics for Choice is Catholics for RH. And the Filipino freethinkers works with them like in a lot of cases. Of course, the most common being the reproductive health bill. So I certainly appreciate what you're saying about trying to change things from the inside and letting go of differences for a shared goal. Speaking of the Vatican, they're of course led by someone who maybe is as diplomatic as you are. He has that skill of being persuasive and friendly and media savvy. But for me, at least, at the end of the day, he's just repackaging the same message. So he's still anti-contraception, anti-abortion, anti-woman, anti-LGBT, equality. So what do you think of him?
Well, I think that it's refreshing, and actually I wrote the Pope a letter because he made the statement that atheists should be judged by their actions. And I sent him a letter, and I said Catholics should be judged by their actions. And I'm ready to meet. When he's available. Let me know. So we just have to keep his feet to the fire, don't we?
I agree. I agree. So speaking of the Vatican's position of women, it's not just the Vatican. Of course, patriarchy is a problem everywhere. And do you think that it's a problem even in the secular community as well? I mean, you participated in an event, Women in Secularism, if I'm not mistaken. Like, what do you think is the state of equality within the secular community in the U.S.?
Well, I've been advocating for the secular community in the U.S. to have a gold standard. We are about 65% white male, and we have a situation here where women are more religious than men. So we're reaching out to the women. There's mainly two reasons. They're less involved in the sciences, and they're looking for services that the church and the religious community can provide, mainly for their families and their children. Daycare, after-school care, help in the summer, things like that. So I think the secular community needs to step up and help them with those basic needs, and then you'll see them come over and they'll be able to leave organized religion. So we have a big diversity program at the Secular Coalition for America, and we're really focused on reaching out to women and bringing them into the movement. So instead of just complaining, we're out there trying to fix it. But there is a problem. And, whose fault is it? Well, I blame it on organized religion.
I see. But a lot of the feminists, in particular in the secular movement, blame it on the men, on some particular men, such as Richard Dawkins, who has the white male privilege or what have you. This is what they call it. Do you think that feminism is an issue that should be on the forefront of the secular movement, or do you think that everyone should be more focused on secularism as a main issue first, as the lower hanging fruit, instead of trying to get everyone on the same page in such a nuanced thing like feminism?
Well, at the Secular Coalition for America, we're focused on separation of religion and government, and we have a long list of agenda that we're working on. And it's very unfortunate that equal rights did not pass and didn't happen here in the U.S. And I think that it's something worthwhile to work on, but it's not such a pure separation of religion and government issue as many of the others that we're focused on. Just because someone is white male, I see Richard Dawkins doing a lot of wonderful things. As a matter of fact, the Richard Dawkins Foundation is the group that pays for all the child care at the conferences in the U.S. so that the women can go to the non-theist and atheist and agnostic conferences. So he's aware of the problem, and instead of just doing nothing, he's putting his money where his mouth is. And, because he's white male, I don't think we should attack him because of that. He is, everything I can tell about him and others is that they're trying to fix the problem and are part of the solution, and admit that there is the discrimination has been there, the history's there, but then also I don't think they want women to just completely dwell on that and get into victimhood. They're feminists, they're more independent feminists, and trying to fix the problem, which is exactly what I'm trying to do. I've seen a lot of discrimination, a lot of discrimination because I'm from Alabama, regional discrimination, because I'm female, and because I'm a Republican. Most of the discrimination I receive in my life from around the world is for those three issues. So I'm just trying to fix it, correct it.
I see. And lastly, what message would you like to leave the advocates of secularism here in the Philippines, especially knowing the situation here that's pretty similar to the U.S., but I think a tad more extreme?
Well, we have a extremely high God belief, close to 80% in our country. So we're only about 22% secular. And so we're way up there. There's no country in Europe, Australia, New Zealand, or Canada that has more than a 50%. So I think that we're most similar to the Philippines, our brothers and sisters there. So we should work closely together, and from the strategies that we learn here and what you're learning there, we should share information. And Catholicism is, it's a large religion here in the U.S. and certainly rivals the Protestants. So I just want to work more closely together, and don't give up. That would be my response. Everything's trending our way, for sure.
And thank you so much. Thank you so much for your time. I hope to learn more from you beyond this conversation, and I hope to talk to you next time.
Thank you. Love your country. I've been there. Okay.
Okay.
Goodbye.
Goodbye. So I'll end this recording now. But yeah, thank you so much for participating in this, and I'll send you a link to the post once it's up. And just a personal question: Do you watch Newsroom?
Newsroom? No, I don't, but I need to. I'm going to start. Okay.
It's really good, and the hero there is a very progressive Republican, so I think you'll appreciate the show.
Okay. All right. I need to be current and hip. I will to that. Thanks for telling me about it.
Okay. Good. Have a nice day.
Okay. Goodbye, Red. See you.
Goodbye. See ya.